going to talk about 5 ways to get started in real estate investing. And Maria and Beth and I are going to go over different ways. Some things we're going to discuss together, and then some things we'll discuss based on our experience. One of us or some of us have more expertise in some areas than others. So we're going to talk about wholesaling today. We're going to talk about flipping. We're going to talk about wholetailing, buy and hold rentals, as well as so both long and short term. We're going to talk about commercial real estate, and then we're going to talk about passive investing, which I know is my favorite. So I think it may be, I don't want to speak for the other ladies, but it's pretty magical. So I'm pretty sure it's up there on their list as well. That being said, this is our contact information. I'm going to leave this up here for a moment. We are also going to put it on at the end, and I'm just going to change my screen for one area so you can see a little bit better. We will share it at the end as well. Throughout the presentation, if you have questions, you can either pop them in the chat or hold on to them. We do have time for Q&A at the end. And we will put this at the end, but we do recommend that you reach out to each and every one of us. Sometimes the 3 of us work together. Sometimes we work independently. We may have same offerings. We may have different offerings. So one of the things we'll discuss is connecting with each of us. So if you want to take a minute or take a screenshot of this, and then we'll put it on at the end as well. All right, we did this in alphabetical order. My name is Angie Aki. I am the owner and founder of Ohana Investment Partners. Yes, my husband's family is from Hawaii, so we embrace the Hawaiian lifestyle and mentality. So I started Ohana Investment Partners and truly wanted to create a family and a community to bring passive real estate investing to as many people as possible. Because I mentioned before, I believe it is magical, it is life-changing for individuals and for families. And I believe that there can be a huge ripple effect in the world by positively affecting one person, one family, one community at a time. I've been both an active and passive real estate investor since 2018. I still invest both actively and passively, and invest in both multifamily, commercial development, entitlement, real estate investments. I also lend as well. I am a part equity owner in over 600 doors, which has happened in less than 12 months. So we'll get to that towards the end of the presentation. That is through fund management and syndications, and have completed over 100 active real estate transactions in a short amount of time. So I absolutely love what I do. I love to participate with the lenders I work with in offerings because, again, passive real estate investing, in my opinion, is where it's at. That's a sneak peek to that. And then I'll hand it over to Beth.
Thanks, Angie. Good evening, everyone. My name is Beth Underhill. I'm the founder of Lifestyle Equities Group. I've been active in construction and real estate for 20 plus years. My husband and I, we've owned a construction company building outdoor living spaces. And then over the last 5 years, we've actually been flipping over $4 million worth of single family homes here in the greater Cincinnati area. Currently, I'm GP on over 500 multifamily units. I hold equity in an RV park as well as a hotel in Panama. So I like to say that I'm a international investor. And I'm working on several development projects as well as trying to close on a couple of other deals before the end of the year. I've been a serial entrepreneur. I love being in business for myself. And it's allowed me to master areas of finance, marketing, client relations. And what I mostly love to do is actually the client relation component of it, and making sure that clients or investors, I should say, are able to invest seamlessly and with ease. I do have extensive background in home renovations and construction, and that's really the driving force behind me getting involved in real estate. I just have a passion for making sure that people have a functional, safe place that they can call home. And yeah, excited to be here tonight and share my knowledge with you. So I'm going to turn it over to Maria now.
Hey guys, I'm gonna keep it short and sweet because I know you know how to read, so I won't read my bio to you. But basically, I've been in real estate since 1996. I started as a broke college kid doing lease option deals with no money down. And so I've done everything from single family homes, did a little bit of flipping, apartments, and hotel conversions. So been in all those spaces, and I'm just here to kind of share some of my knowledge with you guys to save you some of the brain damage I've been through.
And speaking of brain damage, that's a really great segue. No, I'm joking. We're going to start with wholesaling, and I make that joke because I solely wholesaled for about 3.5 years, and that was the only thing I focused on. So I spent a lot of time and energy wholesaling and may or may not have gotten a little bit of brain damage, but it's good. I firmly believe that wholesaling is the fastest path to cash in real estate investing. And I say that because you can get a property under contract and you can assign that contract very, very quickly, and you can assign it in, I don't know, sometimes 3 days, sometimes 7 days, but it's very quick. And then you get your assignment fee or your profits from double closing, and you move along. So it's very transactional, and it's very fast cash. For those of you that don't know what wholesaling is, it is simply that, right? So it's just getting a property under contract and then assigning that contract. So let's say you get a single family house in Orlando under contract, and Maria is like, well, Maria wouldn't want to flip it, right? But maybe Beth is like, yes, I want to flip that property. I get it under contract for 200. Maybe I assign it to Beth for $225,000. That spread, or what she is paying in essence for my contract, is the wholesale or assignment fee, or if we're double closing, the fee that I would get. So there's more that goes into it, but that's a really high level view of what wholesaling is. So here are some of the key points. Again, you can get in and out very quickly as soon as title is clear. You assign your position as a buyer to an end buyer, so you don't have to deal with lenders. And I feel like this past 30 days have been like the hiccups with lenders, and now everything with interest rates, right? There's a lot going into it, and rates are changing and everything is changing, right? So with wholesaling, you don't have to deal with lenders. If you're assigning, you don't have to deal with closing costs. If you're double closing, you in fact do, because you're closing the transactions. We call it A to B, B to C. You're closing the transaction on the first part and then turning around in the same day, same hour, and selling it immediately to another end buyer. So you don't have to deal with a lot of the headaches that you would have to deal with flipping or actually closing on a property. You can help a seller out of a distressed situation, and you get paid for doing so. So these are not houses that some of them may be listed on the MLS. So I don't want to use that as an example, but they're not houses that you would typically walk in and say, oh my gosh, this is beautiful. Like, bring the kids, we're moving in, right? These are typically houses that are either in a distressed status, right, or situation. They may or may not have a roof. They may not have working AC, which in Florida is a really big thing. It may be a hoarder house, or it may be a distressed situation. So someone may need to sell quickly because they are moving. We had that happen once. It may be in probate, or something else is happening, right? Maybe someone passed away. They can't afford the payments or taxes or whatnot. Instant gratification. So again, once you're done with the deal, you're done with the deal. That's it. So there's no follow-up that you have to do. It is instant gratification. So in my scenario I went back to, I sold Beth this contract because she's paying for the contract technically. So I made $25,000. I get my money, and that's it. And I'm done. And then Beth is taking the headaches and the flipping and all the awesome things she's going to talk to you about. And so this for me honestly worked really well. I came out of a corporate sales position and did very well. So I had a very large income to replace, and wholesaling gave me the ability to do that. So I am very grateful for it. So it does kind of model a sales or transactional model. You don't deal with contractors or tenants. That is also something you don't have to do when you're wholesaling. And, you know, both Beth and Maria will talk about that. I think Maria gets into tenants, termites, and toilets in a little bit, but you don't have to deal with any of that with wholesaling. So that's definitely a pro. Another pro is it doesn't matter what the market's doing, right? Especially right now, there's so much speculation. What's the market doing? Are we in a recession? Are we out of a recession? Are rates going up? Are they going to come down? Are we in a bubble? Are we not in a bubble? When you're wholesaling, this may sound a little crass, but you don't really care because you're in and out of the transaction so quickly. It doesn't matter. And anything, so the only thing you have at risk is the EMD or the earnest money deposit, which is typically we would use $100 or maybe $1,000. That's the only money at risk. There are some cons to it. It is very active because it's very transactional. So once you close on the deal, you're looking for the next one, right? So you have to feed the beast. You have lack of control because you're not the seller and you're not the buyer. So you're in essence the middleman or middlewoman in this case, and you don't really have full control over either side. So that for me was really difficult. May or may not have some control issues, but that was difficult because you are counting on people to do what they say. There are high operational costs because you're marketing direct to seller. You may be sending out mailers, you may be sending out texts, you may be cold calling, you may be whatever it is, door knocking. So the operational costs are very high, and it is taxed as ordinary income. So some of the basics of wholesalings are your lists. You can pull any type of list you want, and lists are very abundant. So depending on your marketing method, and we'll kind of wrap them together, would kind of determine the list that you're pulling. So you would need a high volume list, such as high equity, if you are using a high volume marketing method like cold calling or text, because you burn through those numbers and those leads very quickly. Where you may want a more niche list like a probate list or a bankruptcy list or people going through a divorce, if you're doing a more niche marketing method like mailers, or you're calling yourself, or some people start out handwriting letters. There's acquisitions, excuse me, and dispositions. Sorry about that. Acquisitions is when you acquire the property or you get the property under contract, and dispositions is simply finding a buyer for the asset or the contract. So you're assigning the contract, right? So you're finding an end buyer. You do have a team in wholesaling. So your title or closing agent is part of your team. You can partner with people. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. You can partner with people through JV, or like I have a really good group of colleagues that we will partner together. We will joint venture or a JV, but you never want to daisy chain. So it is actually not legal. If Beth sends out a property and I'm like, oh, that's great, I think I'll have a buyer, I'll mark it up or add $5,000 to it. That's not legal. You actually have to have some type of right to market it. So I always remind people of that. And you really have to differentiate yourself. It's just like anything in life. There's a lot of wholesalers, right? There's a lot of flippers. There's a lot of syndicators. There's a lot of buy and hold people. So you really have to differentiate yourself and talk to people about what makes you different. So that is wholesaling in a nutshell. And because we will transition into flipping next, the hybrid is called wholetailing. Kind of the hybrid, because sometimes depending on the market, depending on where you are and what the market is doing, you can make almost the same as a flip, or sometimes even more. If you literally close on an asset or property, you may or may not even clean it out and paint it and put it on the MLS. You can make money that way. And I know a lot of people that have made a lot of money doing that. Wholetailing is very light cleanup, and you list it on the MLS. So a wholesale that we bought in December, it was almost a year ago, we bought the mobile home for $57,000. And then we sold it the next month for $120,000. So we made a little over $63,000. And we went in, I think we patched a couple holes maybe. and got some furniture out they had left, and that was it. So you can do really well. Obviously, the market is a little bit different than what it is now, although it's still good in Central Florida. So it does depend on the market, but you can do very well with wholesaling as well. And that being said, we're going to move into flipping, and this is where Beth takes over.
Thanks, Angie. All right, I'm super excited to talk about flipping. Does it really look like what you see on HGTV? And that is the million-dollar question I get asked all the time. And after renovating, which is how we like to refer to it, over $4.5 million of assets, the short answer to that is no. Now, Hillary from Love It or List It and Chip and Joanna and everyone else that's on HGTV, they make it look very appealing, but it's not quite as sexy as what it appears to be. And we're going to dive into the pros and the cons of flipping and go behind the scenes to discuss real life flipping. Thanks for turning that slide. Okay, so flipping is the most active way to actually invest. You are involved from start to finish with the project. You are sourcing the property to create, from sourcing the property to creating a budget, to lining up contractors, to finding an investor, or maybe even getting a hard money loan, to picking out things like fixtures, tile, carpet, etc., to finally selling the property. That is all on you when you are flipping. And when you have multiple projects going on, it can be 7 days a week. Now, if you are only doing this and that is the sole thing, great. But if you've ventured into flipping or you're thinking about venturing into flipping as maybe like a side hustle, you might be in for a bit of a surprise. Now, you are the project manager. You're making all or most of the decisions. You're directing contractors. You are responsible for the aesthetics of the project. You might be listing it yourself or possibly with a realtor. Now, there are some individuals that love this level of involvement. And if you are that type and gravitate towards this, then flipping really could be for you. And there are other people that find this to be extremely overwhelming and a bit too much. Now, more costs are involved with flipping versus wholesaling or wholesaling. You always want to make sure that you are anticipating more than what you think the project is going to cost. For instance, a good rule of thumb is to maybe add about 10 to 15% onto your budget to account for all of the unknowns, or if you have to hold on to the property longer than what you think. And with today's prices, I would probably lean towards adding on 15%, not necessarily 10%. So for instance, if you had a $100,000 budget, which would be a very big budget for a flip, I would tend to budget towards 115, but I would still trying to keep all of my expenses as close to the original budget as possible, just so that actually you can make more money when it's all said and done. But you never want to skim. That is the worst thing you can do because it will show in the end product. And why do we tack on an extra 10 to 15%? Because there's always these unknowns. Invariably, something is always going to come up. If you've ever watched Love It or List It, Hillary's always like, oh, now what am I going to do? We've got this that just happened or that just happened and it's not going to fit in my budget. So you just want to make sure that you are planning for those sort of things, especially if you're buying sight unseen, which is what some people will do from if they're investing remotely, or if you make an offer without an inspection contingency, then you don't know really what you're in for and the possibilities of unknowns are going to be greater. So keep this in mind when you're budgeting. Other things to take into consideration: delays from obtaining permits to contractors going MIA on you, and you might have to hire another contractor, to inspectors who are really on their own timeline. I mean, they are not on your timeline at all, to financing. For instance, if you're trying to purchase the property, or even if the person who ends up buying the property from you, the financing might take longer. You need to factor all of these things in to your potential delays. Because why? Because you have things called holding costs. And what are holding costs? Holding costs are taxes, interest, mortgage payments, utilities, and these things add up on a monthly basis. So if you have figured out exactly like, okay, here's how long it's going to take my project to complete, and I'm going to factor on, you know, another month's worth of holding costs or another 2 months worth of holding costs. You always want to be overestimating. Why? Because you just never know about all of those unknowns. And especially in today's market, things are sitting on the market. Houses are sitting on the market for a much longer period of time than they have been in the past. They are not going same day anymore, especially in certain areas. And so you want to make sure that if you are going to flip a property, you factor in all of these things, because invariably something will go sideways. It's just the way it is. One thing that we always like to keep in mind is get in, get out, and get paid. So you want to get into the property as quickly as you can, and you want to get out of the property as quickly as you can so you can get paid as fast as you can. So the less renovations, sometimes the better. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about the pros. Number one, you know, the profitability of something. You know, we actually did a project. We purchased it for $315,000. We rehabbed it for $230,000. We sold it for $765,000. The difference was $220,000. We didn't pocket the full $220,000 because of all the holding costs, which amounted to be about $75,000. But we made a good chunk of change. However, in this particular instance, we were on this project for over a year because we actually popped the top off of a ranch house and built a second story. So when you're thinking about like, oh, you know, $150,000, that's a nice, you know, that's nice pocket change. It is, but not when you consider the time factor of it all. So keep that in mind as you are flipping. No tenants to deal with. That is a beautiful thing. No tenants, and you don't have any clients to deal with. You are making all of the decisions. So you don't have to worry about someone who says, oh, I don't think I like that paint color, or I don't like this granite. You know, you're deciding what the project is going to look like. And of course you want to sort of keep it as kind of middle of the road as possible. Don't go too extreme with your paint colors, your granite, your wood, or anything like that. But you're making the decisions, and you don't have anybody chomping in your ear saying, I think it should be like this, or you don't have a tenant calling you up at, you know, 2 o'clock in the morning to say, hey, my toilet's broke. Can you come fix it, please? Now it can be a quick turnaround depending on the size of the project. You might have smaller projects that maybe only require maybe $20,000 worth of work, but you might have larger ones that require $100,000 worth of work. So it just all depends on the project size that you want to take on. So know going into it that if you're looking at a bigger project, it's just going to take more time. One thing I love about flipping is that you can easily use other people's money. On all of our $4.5 million+ flips, we used other people's money the entire time. We had investors that were financing the project, and they made a very nice return, but we did not have to pull any of our money out of our pocket. The only time we did was maybe if we had to front money for something, but then we got reimbursed by either the hard money lender or the investor. The thing I like about it too is just that you can express your creative side. I'm a creative person, so I took a lot of pride in the houses that I helped design. You're breathing new life into a home, and you're hopefully, you know, going to hand this off to someone who's going to, you know, create a loving home and an environment. And so when you're, you know, doing the things that you're doing to it, it's really neat to see the project come alive. So those are some of the pros. Now, of course, the cons, it is very, very active. And hopefully you've figured that out just from all of the things that I've mentioned earlier. And of course, there's a lot of unknowns, so you have to be prepared for that. The lack of control that can come along with contractors, permits, if you have to get variances and so forth. So again, just know what you're getting into before you actually decide to jump in with 2 feet. These projects, they do not get done in an hour like what TV shows. It's very misleading, and I just want people to be aware of that. And I'm happy to speak with anybody further upon it. And again, these are very market dependent. What was true, you know, 6 to 8 months ago, as far as the market is concerned about houses going as quick, it is not true right now. So you have to be very conscientious about how you're buying. Buy low. If you buy correctly with a flip property, then you're going to allow and have or give yourself, excuse me, enough of a margin so that even if you don't sell it for what you hope to sell it because the market is telling you something different, you can at least still make some money on it. And then again, it's taxed. as ordinary income. So Uncle Sam is going to take a chunk out of this. So those are the highs and lows about flipping. And now I'm going to toss it over to Maria. She's going to talk about buy and holds.
All right. You guys feel like you're drinking out of a fire hose yet? It's a lot of stuff coming at you quick. So I'm going to talk about buy and hold. So this is more the traditional real estate model that you've all heard of. This generally applies to single family homes, duplexes, triplexes, and quads. So what we consider residential real estate. We'll get into commercial real estate a little down the line, but anything up to 4 units is considered residential. So in your buy and hold in that scenario, you know, you heard the old adage, don't wait to buy real estate and wait. That's what we're talking about here. So it's true that real estate generally increases in value over time. So that's what that's all about. But I'm going to caution you never to buy simply based on that appreciation that you know is coming down the line. You want to make sure that anything you buy as an investment is going to cash flow from day one, or you can find yourself in trouble if the market takes a dip, right? So unlike commercial real estate that we're going to be talking about, you don't have control over the value of that property. It's going to be based on appraisals that are based on comps in the area, right? So what your neighbors are doing. So if a neighbor runs down a house next to you or close to you, it can bring down the value of your house. So you have to be prepared for that. So that's why you want to make sure you cash flow. So I'm going to urge you to do that. That's number one rule in this world. The problem with that is a lot of people misjudge what rental properties really are going to cost, you know, to hold long term. So a common mistake I see people do all the time is they take the rent and then they subtract out the cost of the mortgage on that, and they think that that's their profit. And that's, you're leaving a lot out right there. So we're just going to go over a few of those items. So if you're going to do this, you really want to itemize all of these items and get like as exact costs as you can. There are rules of thumb that we'll talk about, but this is the big one. So property taxes. Real estate agents will often show you what the current property taxes are, and you'll think that that's what you're going to pay, but you won't, because those taxes will be reassessed when you buy it. So you need to talk to the property appraiser and find out what your taxes are going to be. So that's number one. I see that underestimated all the time. Insurance, same thing. Doesn't matter what they're paying on the insurance, get your own quote. Okay. Maintenance. There's always more maintenance than you think there's going to be. The AC, the furnace, lawn care, tree trimming. A lot of people think the tenants are going to take care of a lot more things than they actually end up doing. So you need to put a lot of money in there for that. Utilities are not always covered by the tenants. In some cases, you're going to be paying those, or some of them. Maybe you cover water, they pay for electric, something like that. But you need to put utility costs in there. Repairs. So above and beyond maintenance, your repairs, I usually put in 500 to 1,000 per year per unit. Unit could be the house or one of the sides of the duplexes. But that's going to depend on the age of the property and how large it is. Obviously, the bigger it is, the more things that can go wrong and the more expensive it's going to be to fix it. HOA dues, note that those are not locked in. So maybe they'll tell you they're $300 a year now, but next year they raise them to $450. Is that going to make you go negative cash flow? So make sure you know about those. Property management. A lot of people are like, well, I'm going to manage it myself, so I'm not going to put anything in the budget for that. Well, at some point you might get sick and tired of managing this property. So you need to make sure that there is room to bring someone on for property management. And when you're talking about residential real estate, you're usually talking about 10%. 10% of the rent they're going to put in their pocket. And even if you end up never turning it over to a professional property manager, you should get paid for your time. So put it in the budget anyway, because you deserve that money. So, and then vacancy is the other one. You know, they're just like, well, if I rent it at this times 12 months, this is how much I'm going to make. Well, the property's not always going to be rented. You're going to have vacancies. They may be physical vacancies where a tenant moves out, takes time to find a new one, maybe have to do some repairs, get somebody else in there. Or you may have economic vacancies. You have a tenant, but they're not paying. So you need to factor that in there. 5 to 10% annually is about what I put in there for that. Cost of evictions. Occasionally you got to evict. It's not a pretty process. It's not a fun process. Hopefully you've bought property in states where you can do it faster. Like here in Florida and many of the Southeast ones, it's 30 to 60 days. But if you're in California or New York, this could be a 6-month process. So you got to really factor it in if you're in those places. And there's going to be legal fees and such associated with that. And reserves, this is a big one. People forget to put reserves away for the big things, what we call the CapEx, the capital expenditures. The time will come if you hold that property long enough that you have to replace the roof or the water heater, or have to paint the whole thing. So this is the big ticket. So you should be taking a certain amount every month and putting it in an account that you don't look at, you forget it's there, and just let that grow until that big item hits, so it doesn't wipe out all your income for that entire year. So those are some of the things I see people not estimate for. My rule of thumb when I'm looking at something just real quick is whatever I think the going rent there is, cut in half. Half of that's going to go to your expenses. Okay. So what you have left over, that now has to cover your mortgage and still leave cash flow. So mortgage is not considered part of your expenses. So 50% goes to expenses, then the mortgage, what's left over is your actual profit. So that's the ins and outs of that one. Another form of long-term hold, the buy and hold strategy, is the short-term rentals. They're becoming really popular right now. So you've all heard of Airbnb and probably VRBO. And there could be medium length rentals in there too, like traveling nurses and seasonal residents. That's all good. And you can get greater revenue doing that, but it is more work. So the buy and hold we were just talking about, like the long-term rentals, it is fairly hands-off. It is fairly passive. It takes time to find the properties and set it all up and find your tenants. But after that, if your tenant stays for a while, it is fairly passive. Short-term rentals, it's not. It's very much work involved. Or you have to turn it over to a professional property manager who's probably going to charge more along the lines of 30% if you're doing that. But yeah, there's good tax flow in it, or good cash flow in it, and there are tax benefits because now it's a business. So you can do an LLC and you can start writing off everything associated with your business and other things that you're doing day to day. That might be business related, you can start writing off, and you can depreciate furniture and that kind of stuff. So there's benefits to that. So there's sustained cash flow in buy and hold. So you're not having to always look for the next deal like you are with wholesaling, and the flips. So there's sustained cash flow long term. You get long-term appreciation. The property is going to grow in value over time. You might have the option to do a cash out refinance. So as that property appreciates in value, you can get a new loan and pull out some of the money that you had put in originally. So now you can go buy another property. It's called the burst strategy: buy, rehab, rent, rinse, repeat, something like that, refinance, rent, repeat. So that's an option. Or you could pull a line of credit perhaps for another business venture. You want to start something new, or to go buy another property, or do a flip, or whatever you want. Any of those things, make sure you're still getting cash flow after you refinance, right? Because obviously you're putting more debt on it. Tax benefits. If you're holding it for more than a year, whenever you do end up selling that, you're now taxed at a capital gains level instead of ordinary income. So that's very different. It's much lower. And also the revenue cash flow that you're getting every month, that is taxed at ordinary income, but you get depreciation off these properties. So oftentimes you're writing that income off. Sometimes you're writing off more than you're collecting. So it's very tax advantageous to hold long-term like this. And less active than the other things we just talked about, unless you're doing the short-term rentals. But there are cons, like Beth said, there's pros and cons to everything. You have to deal with tenants, or you have to deal with property manager who deals with tenants, and trash and termites, the TTTs we talk about. Unexpected expenses come up all the time. It is a long-term play. It's not a get rich quick thing. You're not going to instantly make that $150,000, right? And yeah, there's all the headaches of property management, but there we go.
All right, and next we are going to talk about commercial real estate, which is I should say, I don't want to say it's my favorite because passive is, but my second favorite. It's right up there. They're like neck and neck. They're really intertwined. But commercial real estate, So I frankly stumbled upon commercial real estate just last year. And I fell in love with it immediately. I am a very straightforward person, very logical. I love commercial real estate because it is very black and white, and it is based on numbers and finances. So I don't want the house down the street that sold for way less, to affect my house, right? So that's just appreciation and appraisals and whatnot. When you're looking at commercial real estate, which Maria will get into a little bit, you can force the appreciation. So if you remember before I said that there's a lack of control with wholesaling, the opposite is true with commercial real estate. You truly have a lot of control over the value of the asset, because again, it's all based on finances. So this was just, I uncovered commercial real estate. I went, oh my gosh, this is it. Jumped in with 2 feet, closed down my wholesaling business, and I'm off to the races, right? So absolutely love it. And so we're going to dive into this a little bit. Beth's going to cover what commercial real estate is and how we're defining it, or how it's defined.
Thanks, Angie. Okay, let's define what commercial real estate is. Up to now, we've discussed duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and single-family homes. Those are all residential real estate. However, commercial real estate is defined as 5+ residential units on one parcel, i.e. think apartment buildings, or assets such as storage facilities, mobile home parks, RV parks, retail centers, hotels, medical buildings, restaurants, malls, for that matter. So 5+ is the differential between residential and commercial when it comes to if you're thinking about a place to live. And then if you think about everything else that you drive down maybe a major thoroughfare and you see the restaurants and the Targets and et cetera, et cetera. And that is commercial real estate. And Maria's going to take it away. She's going to discuss the pros and cons of commercial real estate, because we like to talk about pros and cons.
Yeah, so there's a lot of commercial real estate obviously out there. But one of the nice things, it has the sustained cash flow, just like the buy and hold scenario that we just talked about. It actually has all the benefits of the buy and hold strategies that we just talked about, plus a few more. Angie touched on forced appreciation. Anytime you can do anything that increases your income, it increases the value of your property, because there's something called a cap rate in every area. And basically whatever your net operating income is divided by that cap rate is the price, the value of that asset. So anytime you increase that income block, you increase the value of your property. And there's a lot of things you can do to just about any property to increase the income. So, I mean, if you're just being better towards your tenants, they're going to stay longer, they're going to do better. If you improve it, people will be willing to pay higher rents. Maybe you allow pets and charge a pet fee, so now that's more income. Maybe you build a laundry facility, you're collecting laundry income. Maybe you have a valet trash service. Yes, that's a thing. There's just all sorts of ways that you can increase the income. And so you have control of that, and you can force the appreciation of that, which can let you get to that cash out refinance much sooner. So in almost all large apartment complex deals where they're having investors come in, you'll see that they try to do some sort of refinance fairly early on so investors can get their money back. And they do that by adding things that produce greater income in a short period of time, because you can force it. So that's awesome. And you see all the other benefits that regular long-term holds have, but then you have this lower risk of economic vacancy. So if you have a single family home and your tenant moves out and it takes you 3 months to replace them, that's 3 months of zero occupancy, right? You got all the way down to zero because you only had the one tenant to begin with. So now you're carrying the full cost of that mortgage for 3 full months. So that's pretty risky in my opinion. If I have a 100-unit apartment complex and one tenant moves out, it's barely touching my bottom line, right? That's already factored in that we're going to have some amount of vacancy because people come and go. So, but it never brings my income to zero. So it really lowers that risk, which is really nice. Another difference between commercial and residential is the loan structure. So the funny thing is, the more money you borrow, the better the rates usually are, right? So when I was borrowing on single family homes at 7%, in the commercial world, they were paying 4%. And then the other thing is there's oftentimes no recourse in commercial real estate. And what does that mean? That means if I do a really crappy job and I don't fill the properties, I let things go to total, anyway, for some reason, the whole business venture fails and the bank is going to foreclose. It does so only on the property, not on me personally. Okay. So if I foreclose on my personal home or on a single family home that is a rental because my tenant moved out, I couldn't afford the mortgage, whatever, the bank is going to foreclose and take that property, but they're also going to come after me for anything left. If that didn't make them whole, right? They can come after my car, my other assets, all that kind of stuff. With a non-recourse loan, they can't do that. They can only come after the building itself. They can't touch anything else. So that's called a non-recourse loan, and you only get that in commercial real estate. So better rates and no recourse can be very nice. Tax benefits, there are tons and tons and tons of tax benefits, all very similar to long-term hold of single-family homes. But in addition to that, you have something called cost segregation. So the government has decided arbitrarily that buildings, especially residential buildings, whether that is a true residential 4 units or less, or 5 units and up commercial residential, they last 27.5 years, they say. Okay, we all know that there are buildings out there that have lasted 100 years, but basically they let you write them off over the course of 27.5 years. So every year you are taking a deduction, that's your depreciation that you're writing off your taxes for that lost value, because 27.5 years later, there's going to be no value left in this property, even though we know that's wrong. But if you, with commercial property, you can do a cost segregation where you go in and you look at it and say, well, not everything here is going to last 27.5 years. That's a 10-year roof. Those doors are only going to last 5 years. The sink, yes, you can go down to the kitchen sink. The sink's only going to last, I don't know, 12 years. I don't know what a sink lasts. But anyway, there are engineering firms that go in and they look at everything in the building, down to the wall plates, and they decide how long those things are going to last. And that lets you take that depreciation sooner, so you can accelerate it. And right now we've got bonus depreciation too, which is a whole other level of that. We're not going to get into all of that. But the point is, the write-offs on commercial real estate are enormous. And you can use that to write off all the passive income off this property. And if you have other passive income, you can write it off of there. And if one of you is solely into real estate and you have a spouse that makes money elsewhere, you can actually write off their non-passive income with that depreciation as well. So you might be making a ton of money and paying no taxes. So that is definitely wealth building strategy, because it's not what you make, it is what you keep. And then the last thing I want to touch on here is the high return on investment due to scale. When you scale up to these larger sizes, things just get cheaper, your expenses just get less, your expense ratios are reduced because everything is scaled, right? We already talked about your loans being at lower values. Instead of paying 10% to property manager, you're probably paying 4 to 6%. So with scale, you just get like discounts, like with everything else, like shopping at Costco versus your regular grocery store, right? So those are some of the pros of commercial real estate. Of course, there are cons. There's always con. High barrier to entry is one of them. Obviously, these buildings are more expensive, so you have to have more money to get started in that. But that's why we often join forces with others who partner up and join monies together to be able to do this. Generally, a greater knowledge base. This is a more sophisticated realm to play in. It is a long-term play. It's not a get-rich-quick thing like you could do with flipping if you're very good or something like that. You do have to deal with property management still. You're not dealing directly with tenants in this world ever. You always have a professional property management team, but you do have to manage those property managers. And you do need a team. It is a team sport. You really can't tackle this on your own. So that's it on that.
Okay, and now this is my favorite. Now I can truly say this is my favorite. So passive investing, you can own apartments, as Maria alluded to, without being a landlord. So passive investing can help you invest in all different asset classes, all different types. I uncovered passive investing through private lending when I got into real estate investing in 2018. And I still do private lending and lend for flips, like Beth talked about, using other people's money. I lend for flips and it's secured by a note and a mortgage. And I make a certain return, I get my money back, and I do it again, and I rinse and repeat. So that's how I got started into passive real estate investing. And truly, like, I truly believe it is magical and can absolutely help you and help families create and grow generational wealth. So Maria talked about too, one of the barriers to entry in commercial real estate is there's a high barrier to entry, right? You have to have a lot of finances, but you don't have to have a lot of finances if you are working with a group and investing together. So passive investing allows investors to pool funds together and purchase assets beyond what you could ordinarily buy yourself. So if we're talking about a 350 unit apartment building, you may need, I don't know, now with everything going on, maybe you need 4, 10 million, whatever it may be to close the thing, right? Maybe you don't have that sitting around or stashed under your bed. You may, I do not. But what's great about it is you can come together with a group of other investors and called LPs, and we'll get into that, or a group of operators, and invest collectively in this apartment building or this multifamily asset. And this goes, this is what, if you've ever heard the word syndication, I know some people get a little nervous when they hear it, but basically it is pooling funds, and you can do this for any asset class. So I know Beth talked about before with commercial real estate, you can look at storage facilities, you know, build to rent, short-term rental portfolios, apartments, land entitlements. There's all these things. I was trying to think what I'm passively invested in. I like to diversify and invest in multiple different asset classes, and we're going to get into that. But truly, you can take all the advantages of real estate investing, which Maria went over a little bit ago with commercial real estate investing. You can take advantage of all of those benefits with literally none of the work. You can be sitting on the beach with your feet up. So just imagine that you have the operator team or the operations team doing all the work. You get the cash flow, you get your equity split, right? You're getting your money and they're doing all the work. So if you don't think that's magical, it is. You should try it. And I will say, everyone that's ever invested that I know in passive real estate investing has said, oh my gosh, this is myself included. I wish I would have known about this sooner. So that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Beth.
Thanks, Angie. And I'm one of those people that I wish I would have known this sooner. So in addition to what Angie talked about, another thing that I think is magical about passive investing is that it's a team sport. I love working with other people. I don't always want to do things by myself. And I get to work with wonderful people like Angie and Maria when I'm involved in syndications, passive investing, and so forth. So this is more of a we business. It's not a me business, which is a good thing because there is strength in a team versus just one person. And it takes sort of the burden off of like you as an individual if you are the one that maybe is, you know, flipping a property and then have to report to an investor. So having a team is great for the investors that are maybe investing in your team, because they can take comfort in knowing that there's more than one person responsible for their monies. Plus the pooled strength of the team lends itself to making an investment opportunity much more attractive and solid. There's a quote that says, alone we can do so little, but together we can do so much. And I believe that that applies to this. Now, a typical structure, you're going to hear terms like GP and LP, and that's going to be tossed around. And just know that when I first heard GP, LP, I was like, what does that mean? You know, I was trying to make sense of it. I had to go Google it to understand it. But I'm here to be Google for you. And so GP is short for general partners, which in layperson's term, that's just the operations team that Angie had mentioned earlier. The operations team, they're going to find the deal. They're going to get it under under contract, they're going to source the debt, and they're going to be the ones managing the asset. Essentially, they are doing all of the work, which is what you want as an LP. And an LP is short for limited partner, and that's the actual investor. There are two types of limited partners, or two types of investors, I should say. Maria is going to touch upon that here shortly. But know that the investor is not doing any other work other than collecting and depositing distributions. They get to sit back and watch their money work for them, which is a beautiful thing. Now, when you are passively investing, there are several things that you're going to want to consider. Number one, you want to think about, hey, what market do I want to invest in? Do I want to invest locally? Do I want properties to be close to me because maybe I want to take a drive-by once a week or once every other week? Or do I want to invest in some of the hotter markets, which are generally in the Sun Belt areas right now? And that could be close to you depending on where you live. I don't live in the Sun Belt, but Angie and Maria do. Or do you want to invest in places that maybe you might want to take a trip to go visit and look at the property, and then you can write it off? So you need to do some research, but what might determine the market that you want to invest in is also what type of asset class, or maybe even the team that you're going to invest in. So when it comes to assets, you want to think about, what are you attracted to? Personally, I love hotels in addition to multifamily. But, you also want to think about, like, okay, if I love hotels, are they going to give me the returns that I'm looking for? So think about the returns from different asset classes. What do they yield? If it's multifamily, for instance, do you want to invest in a class A, B, or C property? They're all going to provide different returns, and they're actually, you're going to have different reasons for investing in each of these. And we can dive into that, at a later date, but just know that these are some of the things that you need to consider. So do your research. I highly recommend, before, just jumping in with 2 feet, do your research on asset classes, markets, and also the team. The team that you invest in, the ones that you are going to be, that are going to basically be asking you for the money, and you're going to say, here it is. You want to make sure that this team is a solid team. What's their track record? In other words, how many full cycle deals have they done? What have the returns been on those full cycle deals? How many assets do they currently have under management? Do they have maybe too many assets under management, too much that they're taking on right now, and aren't going to be able to pay attention to everything that they have coming, at them? Do their strategies align with yours? How is their communication style? Do they get back to you right away? Does it take them, 72 hours or maybe a week to respond to questions that you might have? So those are the sort of things, like, think about those things. And as you're speaking to a team, if you're considering an investment opportunity, do you feel comfortable with them? Never hesitate to ask for references, and never hesitate to think about doing a background check. It can't hurt, because this is your hard-earned money, and you want to make sure that you're putting it in a place that you feel most comfortable. And last but not least, think about your investment goals. Are you looking for cash flow or equity? Are you willing to part with your money for 3 to 5 years? Or do you need something that's maybe a little bit more of a short-term play, and you want to see your money back less than a year? What's your risk tolerance? Is it high? Is it low? All of those things are definitely going to play into, just exactly, what it is that you're going to be looking for, and whether or not an investment opportunity aligns with that. And now I'm going to turn it over to Maria. She's going to continue to talk about passive investing.
Okay, so Beth talked about there are 2 different types of investors when you're getting into this. And so there's basically accredited investors and sophisticated investors. And this is going to determine what you're going to be eligible to invest in. And you may have seen properties, maybe someone's put something out on Facebook or something, says, hey, great investment opportunities, and they have all this information about it. And somewhere there it says, for accredited investors only. And maybe you don't know what that means. So you don't know if this is an opportunity that's available to you or not. So here's what that means. Basically, you might be an accredited investor and not even know it. So because it's just not terminology that you hear a lot. But it basically means if you have an annual income of 200,000 or more, or 300,000 jointly with a spouse if you're filing jointly. If you have that, you can put on the little accredited investor pin, you're good to go. If not, if you have a lost the terminology, help me out, net worth, that's the word I'm looking for. I should just look at the slide because it's right there in front of me. If you have a net worth greater than $1 million, not counting your personal home, then you're an accredited investor. Now you can count your retirement funds, life insurance, that pretty car in your driveway, anything that's an asset. If you have a rental property, anything like that can count, but not your personal home. If that's more than $1 million, then you're an accredited investor. And then you might be able to invest in deals that you see marketed like that. And that's kind of the thing. Those deals you will see marketed because you're allowed to market them, but only accredited investors can invest in them. The other class is for what we call 506B offerings. These are for people who do not meet that criteria, but they know somebody who's actually on the GP side. They're the sponsor, they're the operator. You hear all this terminology interchangeably, okay? If they personally know that person, if they have a pre-existing condition, then they can invest in these offers. So you can be an accredited investor and also invest in a 506B, that's fine. But you can't be a sophisticated investor and invest in a 506C offering. It's just a way to kind of assure that people aren't going to take advantage of people in a lower income bracket, but to still assure that there are opportunities for those people out there. But if you are a sophisticated investor, then you really need to get out there and get to know some of the sponsors out there so you have more opportunities, because 506B offerings don't come along as often because they can't be marketed. They're a little harder to raise funds for. And so you really have to get to know some sponsors, especially if you want to diversify your portfolio. If you only know one sponsor, maybe they just do one thing in one place. Maybe you want to be in multiple markets and multiple different asset classes. Maybe you want some RV parks and you want some hotels and you want some apartments. So for that reason, if you're in that category, make sure you're getting out there and getting to know some of these people. Yeah, so I already talked about connecting with multiple sponsors and the importance of that, and then educating yourself. That's the other part of being a good investor on either side, whether you're sophisticated or accredited, you really should be educated. And this is not hard, okay? There are a million podcasts, books, YouTube videos, blogs, websites on this material. And some of the sponsors that you might want to vet, they probably have tons of good information on their websites. I know I have tons of videos and downloads. Beth and Angie do the same. We have passive investment guides. We have all the questions you should be asking to people. All of that's available on our websites. So you can subscribe to newsletters. We send out newsletters with information. So lots of ways to get educated, but that's number one. And then start reviewing offerings. You are not compelled to invest in something just because you ask to see the offerings. You know, you can sign up, get all the information, start reading those, because that's one of the best ways to educate yourself, is to get familiar with all that lingo, and then set up a meeting with that sponsor and ask questions. Again, it doesn't cost you anything. It's free education. They're going to give you that time, and they'll help educate you on anything you don't know. And you can talk to them about your investment goals, because that's really important too. Know the timeline for when you're going to need your money back. Know what kind of returns you want to see. You know, are you investing for retirement? So this is a long-term play to where you might want to get into some real long-term holds. Are you investing for a special needs child? I'm in that category. Are you investing for just that one great vacation you want to take 3 years from now? So you want to make sure your money comes back in 3 years. So think about your goals and what you want to do and talk to them about those things, because they can help you. And then you have to figure out where you're going to fund this initial pot of money. Usually, I mean, if you can just come up with the initial pot of money, you can reinvest that over and over again every time there's a refinance event or there's a sale event. So you can make one pile of money work for you over and over again, but you have to come up with, where's that original money going to come from? And the minimum investment usually is, the lowest we usually see is about 25,000. Some minimum investments might be 100,000. It can range. I've seen them as high as 250,000, but that's very rare. But nonetheless, you got to figure out where that money is coming from. So maybe you have money that's sitting around idle in a checking account or in a savings account where it's not getting any sort of interest right now. Maybe you have CDs. You might have stocks and bonds that you're not happy with the volatility of that. Maybe you don't want to cash out all of that, but maybe you want to cash out a little bit and put it to work in a different asset class. Just kind of diversify your portfolio. Overlooked often are retirement accounts. A lot of people think your only option with your retirement accounts is to put it into the mutual funds that they offer you and you pay all those fees on and you have limited choices. Oftentimes that's not the case. You can pull it out of there. You can self-direct it. We were talking to John a little bit earlier about that. And then you can decide where that goes. And you can literally invest that in a lot of things. It doesn't have to be stocks. It doesn't have to be real estate. You want to go buy gold bars, you can go do that. I think you can even buy crypto. But you could set up like a self-directed IRA, 401k, or EQRP, I think it's called. So if you want more information about any of that, reach out to any of us. We can tell you about that. But don't forget about those funds. If you have other properties or your own property and you're doing a refinance of that and you end up with cash from that, you could use that. Some people use lines of credits to invest in that they get from something else. Someone was just telling me they got a small business loan during COVID. And they gave him a small business loan at like 2%. They gave him $375,000. He invested that in something he was making 15% on. That's pretty sweet. So, you know, there may be things like that. But if you are borrowing money at any time in order to invest, you better darn well make sure that the timeline of your investment monies coming in is going to line up when you have to pay that loan, or you have to make sure that you can float that loan regardless of when your investment come in. So make sure those are in aligned, because that can be risky. So I'll caution you on that one. And then the next one is the most important thing is just take action. Get off the sidelines, make an investment, just start the process. You'll learn so much just by doing. Now that goes for any of these strategies that we've talked about. You know, you can read all you want about flips and you can watch all those TV shows and all that kind of stuff. You're not going to really learn it until you get out there and do it. So that's the same for any of these strategies. At some point, you got to stop learning, stop educating, and just take the leap and go do it. So otherwise, you'll still be going to webinars like this 20 years from now, wondering what you've done. So I think that's about it. We're going to just open it up to questions at this point, and yeah, open it up.
So if you have questions, you can unmute yourself or you can put it in the chat, whatever you want to do. I'm going to put our contact information back up, and then we'll take the slides down so you can see us as we're answering questions. But I know we're a little over the top of the hour, so we want to be respectful of your time, but we want to make sure also we are answering any questions you have. And if you have, you have our contact information on the screen. So if you think of something, we encourage you to reach out to all three of us. Again, sometimes we work together. I think right now we all three have different offerings, right? And we're working on different things. So please reach out to us. And I know you can find our contact information to reach out if you have specific questions on each of our websites as well. So, does anyone have any questions?
There's no way we did such a good job that no one has any questions.
No, we don't have any questions, but we will reach out if we do.
Okay. At least we know you guys are awake. That's good.
Yes.
So we have been listening. How do you typically vet your operators?
I'm sorry, John.
How do you typically vet your operators, and how do you pass that on to us as potential investors?
Okay, well, that's a great question. I'll answer from my side, and then we'll pass it around the room here. So with me, it's I don't get involved with anybody that I haven't known for quite a while, and I've seen them take deals. I've seen how they treat their investors and that they're just ethical people. I typically get in to these partnerships with people that are in masterminds that I'm in. That's sort of a pay to play kind of thing. Masterminds are expensive. It's usually only really serious people that get into those. And again, just getting to know them on a personal basis and really evaluating their underwriting. Also, when anyone comes to me with a deal, I don't have them send me their offering packets. I have them send me the raw data, the raw rent rolls, the raw expenses, what we call the T12s. That's the last trailing 12 months of expenses. And I do all the underwriting myself. And if when I'm done with it, it still passes muster, then I'll talk to them. I'm not going to see their, prepared package and base it on that. How about you, Angie? How do you vet?
So I typically will look at their underwriting, and then I come back with a long list of questions to further dive in. I treat it almost like an audit. And so we'll go through the questions that I have, and I'll get answers to them. I'll talk to everyone on the operator team. Similarly to Maria, I have to have a relationship with them. So there are so many people, that will say, hey, do you want a partner? And I have, I don't know them. I don't have that depth of relationship. And so my first response is typically no, right? So, and I need to get to know you. We also have certain criteria that we look for our investors, from an equity multiple standpoint, cash on cash return, IRR, average annual return, and things like that. So we want to make sure it does hit those metrics. And then we also look in certain asset classes and things like that. But I really, I was talking to someone. I was actually in one of my mastermind meetings earlier today, and to Maria's point, it is a pay to play situation, and we do pay a lot of money to be in these masterminds, and the quality and the caliber of a lot of the people in the masterminds is exactly that. It's very high, and it allows you to have a different kind of relationship. But one of the guys was talking, and we were having a conversation, and it was pretty spot on. At the end of the day, when you start looking at a lot of these offerings, you may say, all the numbers start looking somewhat similar. Mm-hmm. But what's really important, what's truly important, is the operator, the operations team and the GP team. So look at their experience, look at their resumes. How many exits have they done? I ask for prior communications on a different offering or a different deal, so I know how they're communicating with investors. How have they performed? Give me, what does their exits look like? Give me some of the financials of other assets. So I dig in. I've spent, quite honestly, most of this year digging in and vetting different operators that I can partner with. And I will tell you that I have narrowed it down to a small group of people. But what that has created is, right, I'm Ohana, I'm all about family and community. It really does create a family and a community feel, because, at the end of the day, if I'm not going to have my mom put her money in something or ask her to, or right, I'm not as worried about mine as hers. If I don't feel comfortable asking her to invest, I'm not going to ask anyone else to invest. And I typically will test drive, for lack of a better term, and invest passively as an LP with these operators on a different deal or another offering before I even start to partner with them. So I have a firsthand experience, and then I partner alongside my investors as well.
Beth, anything you'd like to share? Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, basically, you guys are doing the filtering for us, the investors. So we're kind of investing in your due diligence and your attention to detail and getting to know these different operators.
Yes, that's a good way to look at it. We do the vetting for our investors, but oftentimes there's also a webinar where you get to meet the whole team. It depends how early on in the process you are. Not all teams do webinars, but you should always ask, is there a webinar where all the team members are going to be there, so you get a chance to meet them too? Because most of the time you're not going to know them all. But I think Beth, Angie, and I all think of this as a marriage almost, right? We're going to be working with these people for the next maybe 8 or 10 years. So we want to make sure that we're in bed, so to speak, with people we want to be married to for that length of time.
Yeah.
And even though we do a lot of the due diligence, and that's a great question, and I believe the other ladies do too. I don't want to speak for them, but I know I always tell people I'm doing my best, right, for you, the best I possibly can. You still have to do your due diligence. So you still have to look at it and make sure that the offering matches your investing goals. And we've talked about investing goals, I think all three of us throughout this evening. but it has to match your values, your criteria, your investing goals. So there is still some due diligence that you do have to do, and that we highly recommend. But yes, we do our own vetting. And then I know for me, and I think all three of us have done this. If any of my investors want to hop on a call with one of the operators, that's always, always, always available. So it's not like, oh no, there's a separation. There's no separation. So we want everyone in it. We want to sit around the table and break bread together, and then make a lot of money too.
Okay.
Yeah. Beth, did you want to add anything to that?
I think you ladies have done a beautiful job of covering it. But I will say this, and this is for everybody. Relationships are key in this business. As I talked about, it's a team sport. As Maria mentioned, it's sort of like, I know for me, I dated a lot of potential sponsors and investors, right? And I didn't decide to like really get into a serious relationship until I actually was feeling more comfortable. And that's really the best way of putting it, to be honest. Because, I was in my own world flipping. And then when I pivoted into commercial, it was like this whole other, this plethora of people. And I'm like, oh my gosh, who do I trust? Who do I, and some of it was, going with your gut. And some of it took some time to just, even watch what are they putting out on Facebook, and what kind of posts are they putting out there? Are they talking about real estate, which is great? Or, are they sharing things that are going on with, their family? And, or are they putting, all this negative stuff that sometimes you see? You can do, your own due diligence just by simple like stalking on social media, for that matter. Go check them out on LinkedIn. Go check them out on, wherever it is. And it's that kind of stuff, that resonates like with me or doesn't resonate with me. I want to align myself with people that, have the same, that are like-minded, the same values, that are going in the same direction. We're on the same train. We're going in the, to the same end game. Because, a lot of times, even we, I think I can speak for us all and say, yeah, maybe we've kind of, thought about getting involved in maybe some questionable people, or you find out after the fact that they might be questionable. So, again, I think we are doing the vetting process, for you, but I encourage you to, again, go do your own fair share of it, because it's important that you feel comfortable with where you're putting your money, and not just based off of what I'm saying, or Angie, or Maria, for that matter. So that's all I have to add.
I love how you talk about dating. I talk about marriage. It really is that way. But in the end, it's our reputations that are on the line.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
if we don't vet these people good, and I go tell my friends and family to invest in something and they lose money, that's it. My reputation's out. I'm out of this business for good, right? Not to mention, I put like a ton of my own money in every one of these deals. Like, I invest in everything that my investors invest in, usually to a much larger degree than anybody else is coming in. I'm usually coming in pretty heavy on them. So I don't want to lose my ass. I don't want to lose anybody else's money. And I sure as heck don't want to ruin my reputation.
That's good to know.
Yeah. And it does, right, going back to the mastermind, I know I have quite a few contacts, and as people, right, say, hey, do you want to partner? Do you want to work together? It feels like there's a lot of people, but it's really a small world and a small network. And I'll start reaching out and saying, hey, do you know this operator? Do you know this? Do you know this? And then all of a sudden, I pretty good answers and pretty good feel. And I'm a straight shooter, and everyone, for the most part, is a pretty straight shooter with me. And so I can at least do a quick sniff test, for lack of a better term, within minutes, which is awesome, right? So it's part of the pay to play benefit and bonus.
Sounds good.
Awesome question. Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions? Any other questions? All right. Well, that being said, I think we'll wrap it up. I know we ran a little over, but thank you all for coming, and thank you for your time. I will put the contact information back up again. If you didn't grab it, you can take a screenshot. Please reach out to us. We would love to hear from each and every one of you with any questions, or if there's anything you would like covered in future webinars, we're happy to discuss that as well.
Thanks so
Thanks a
much
lot.
for
It was
spending
very
your
informative.
evening with us. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Appreciate your
Yeah.
time.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.